Hey, today we are going to learn how to solve multi-step equations. And if you look at your notes, you'll see that we have steps here worked out on or wrote out in order to be able to solve these equations. The very first thing you always want to do when looking at an equation is look to see if there's a big fraction bar. And in order to get rid of that big fraction bar, you could either set up a proportion and then solve the problem by cross multiplying or multiplying by the denominator, whichever way you would rather. The next step is to see if you need to remove parentheses by using the distributive property. Then combine like terms on the same side of the equation. And then if there's variables on both sides, you need to move the one variable over to be with the other variable. The next step is to move the constant to the opposite side of the variable, and you'll do that by adding or subtracting. And last step, you'll either divide or multiply to get the variable all by itself. So example number 1 says 4x plus 3 equals 15. Now, I recommend that you draw a line down your equal sign. Once you do that, then you can identify what's going on in the problem. It's 4 times x, and then it's adding 3. So if you go down through your list of items, you're going to start on this line because variables are not on both sides. So we'll start here. We're going to move the constant, which means it's a number by itself with no letter, to the opposite side of the variable by adding or subtracting. Right now, the 3 is being added because your goal is to ultimately get this x by itself. So we got to get rid of the 3. In order to get rid of the plus 3, we are going to subtract 3 on both sides. That is known as the subtraction property of equality. So that's abbreviation for subtraction. So we're subtracting 3. When I do that, I'm going to bring down everything that's left. A positive 3 minus 3 is 0. So the only thing that's left is this 4x. So I have 4x is equal to 15 take away 3 is 12. Next step is to divide or multiply to get the variable by itself. Right now, the 4 is being multiplied by the x. So the opposite of multiplication is division. Now again, my goal is to get this x by itself. So I've got to get rid of this 4. So I'm going to get rid of it by dividing it. 4 divided by 4 is 1. And so we say it cancels out, but really it's equal to just 1x. You don't have to write the 1 there because it's understood. 12 divided by 4 is 3. So if the x is by itself, which it is, that's when you know you're finished. Now, this step right here, we divided, so it's the division property of equality. So divide 4. Now, in order to check your work, all you're doing is plugging in the value that you got for x. Remember, when you plug in numbers for letters, you always use parentheses. And we're going to plug in a 3 here. Now, when I plug that in, I'm going to use Desmos and see if it's equal to 15, because that's what it is supposed to be equal to. So as I type that in, you can see my Desmos here, 4 parenthesis 3, close my parenthesis, plus 3. And you can see here that it is equal to 15. And the way we can show that is if we're working down, this stuff is equal to 15. We bring down our 15, and that is equal, so I put a check mark because I did check it. All right, example number 2. Again, I'm going to draw my line down my equal sign. I need to get this x by itself eventually. But in order to do that, I need to go through my list again. There's not a big fraction bar because this is a small one. There's no parentheses here, so I don't need to use the distributive property. There's no like terms because this is a variable term and this is a constant. So no like terms on the same side of the equation. The variable is already on one side, so I don't do that step. Next is to move the constant, remember the number by itself, to the opposite side of the variable by adding or subtracting. So right now, this minus 3 is being subtracted. So to get rid of the minus 3, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. Again, that's the addition property of equality. So we're going to write add 3. Negative 3 plus 3 is 0. So that cancels. I am left with x over 4 over negative 4, because the sign goes with it, is equal to 7 plus 3 is 10. Now, my goal, remember, is to get this x by itself. So the next step is to divide or multiply to get the variable by itself. Right now, that fraction bar means division. So to get rid of that divide -4, I'm going to multiply by whatever's on the denominator, which is -4. When I multiply by that -4, this -4 and this -4, they cancel. So the only thing that's left on this side is x equals. And then 10 times -4 is -40. Now, again, that is called the multiplication property of equality. So I'm going to say multiply -4. Okay, so we isolated the x to get it by itself. Now, in order to check your work, remember what you do. You plug it in using parentheses. So I'm going to rewrite here -40 in parentheses, and that was being divided by -4 minus 3 is equal to 7. We're going to see if this side really does equal 7. Now I'm going to plug that in my Desmos here. Parenthesis, -40. I'm going to type it in exactly as I see it, minus 4. Now be careful because this minus 3 is not in the denominator. So I'm going to click out and do minus 3. And then you can see it. It does equal 7. So I know I've got this correct. Go ahead and turn the page. The next example is x minus 3 divided by -4 equals 7. Now, remember those steps that we had to come back to. The first step is to get rid of the big fraction bar. So in order to get rid of this big fraction bar right here, we're going to need to multiply by whatever the denominator is. Okay, so the denominator is -4. So I'm going to multiply, because this is divide right here, I'm going to multiply both sides by -4. When I do that, my -4's cancel. And the thing that's left on this left-hand side is just this x minus 3. It makes it way easier to go ahead and do it this way in order to get that by itself. So 7 times -4 is -28. And that was the multiplication property of equality. So step 1 was to multiply by -4. And I abbreviated multiply. Next is to get the variable by itself. So I'm going to get rid of this constant. To get rid of the constant, I will add 3 to both sides. So that is the addition property of equality. Add 3. And when I add 3, -3 plus 3 makes 0. So I can just mark them out. I'm left with the x, and that's equal to -25. When I check my work, I'm going to plug in -25 using my parentheses, minus 3 all over -4, and that should be equal to 7. Now, when I use Desmos, because it's a binomial on top, meaning 2 terms, I'm going to go ahead and push my divide sign to get my fraction button going. So then I'm going to do parenthesis -25 minus 3, and then I'm going to click in the denominator and type -4. And if you can see that, it does equal 7. So I know that I'm correct, because if it was something other than 7, then I would know I need to go back and fix my mistake. All right, example number 4. This is a proportion, so we're going to cross multiply. When I cross multiply, I take the numerator of one side and multiply it by the denominator on the other side. Now, there is another way of solving this problem, and it will still give you the exact same answer, but we're going to do cross multiplication on this. So once I multiply that, 2 times 80 is, let me get the right color here, 2 times 80 is 160, W, and then I'm going to say equals, draw that line down through there, and then when I type in my calculator, 16 times 30, that gives me 480. Yes, they're big numbers, but that's okay. Now it's a one-step equation. So in order to get the variable by itself, I'm going to divide by 160 on both sides. When I do that, those cancel. Now I'm left with W is equal to and then typing in your calculator 480 divided by 160, and that gives you 3. So I know my answer is 3. So first step that you want to do is cross multiply when you have two fractions. And then you're going to, here would have been divide by 160 to get the answer. So you can check your work on this. When I plug it in, I'm again going to use my divide button to get my fraction. 2 parenthesis 3, and then down here at the bottom is 16. So that gives me a decimal. In order to get it to be a fraction, if I push that fraction button right there, it will switch it over to a fraction, and that is 3/8. This is 30 over 80. So let's see if that does reduce down. 30 over 80 again gives me a decimal. So if I change it, it will give me a fraction, and those two fractions are the exact same. So I know that I have got that correct. So that's what you would have wrote right here. Now, right here it says when two fractions equal each other, we call it a proportion, just like this. And then we solved the proportion by cross multiplying and then going ahead and solving the equation, which is what we did. All right, the very last thing that we have to do is solving problems with equations. And this is a word problem. Angela rented a car for $30 a day plus a one-time insurance cost of $7. Her bill was a total of $277. For how many days did she rent the car? It is important to go ahead and highlight what the question is asking. So it's asking you how many days it is to rent the car. I go ahead and highlight my other important things so that way I can remember, so I don't have to go back through and re-highlight or reread it a lot. And I also notice here that it says a plus. That's an operator symbol, so I know I'm going to do something with the 30, and I know I'm going to add it to my insurance cost of $7. So that's just to remind myself. Now the question says, how many days did she rent the car? So very first thing, it's very important for you to define your variable. So X is equal to the number of days. To write an equation to fit the problem, if we are finding the total, I forgot to highlight that, I'm sorry. If we are finding the total, actually I'm going to circle it because totals I like to circle. I know that in order to find the total, I've got to add two quantities together to find a total. So my two other numbers besides 277 was 30 and 7. Let's think about what they represent and what our X is. X is a number of days, so that's important to remember. $30 a day and a one-time insurance cost of $7. So the X is going to be sitting next to what it represents, the days. And the only thing that was per day was the 30. So it'll be 30x plus 7 equals 277. That's the equation. I'm going to go ahead and rewrite it down here so that way I can solve it. 30x plus 7 is equal to 277. Now, to solve this problem, it's a two-step equation. So the very first thing I'm going to do, besides drawing my line down my equal sign to keep things nice and organized, is subtract 7. When I subtract that 7, these cancel, and then I'm left with this 30x is equal to 277 minus 7 is 270. The next step I'm going to do is, this is multiplication, so the opposite of multiply is to divide both sides by 30. This leaves you, 30 divided by 30 is just 1x. And that's equal to 27 divided by 30 is 9. Now, it's important for you to answer your question in sentence form. The question was, for how many days did she rent the car? So let's answer that in sentence form because we found X was 9. So we're going to say Angela rented the car, rented the car for 9 days. If you do not write a unit here, then you're going to get it wrong because we need to know what you're talking about.